Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Amazing Race Rewind podcast, the podcast where we go back in time to watch the earliest seasons of The Amazing Race. My name is Andrew, and with me here is Jill. We're here to discuss Season 1, Episode 3, where we lose one of Jill's favorite teams.
I know it was quite a tragedy, but to be honest, there was a moment there where I thought your team was out as well.
Well, yeah, it was between David, Margareta, and Pat and Brenda, but it seemed like Pat and Brenda were quite far behind them.
Yeah, little spoilers for anyone in the episode, but it's what happens when we lose one of our favorite teams. We are going to bring it up right in the beginning.
Right at the top. And yeah, with a detour that I thought was quite ridiculous and that I did not like at all. But we'll get into that later, I suppose.
I suppose.
Something that we haven't mentioned before that's different from like future seasons is that in the opening credits, there's this monologue by Phil where he's like narrating over the opening credits, pretty much describing the premise of the show.
I think that's because the show was new to the air, though. So if people were tuning in for the first time, it's quite jarring to just kind of be thrown into, and you don't really understand what's going on. Obviously, now most people know what the show is, so if you turn on the TV and you put it on, you'll figure it out, or you just kind of know the gist of it. But at the time, it was probably too crazy to just kind of pick up and, oh, what's this about?
And I guess this was also at a time where, because I think reality TV was still a pretty new thing at this time, so...
Reality TV actually developed very, very prominently and very well in the early 2000s. That was really the rise of reality TV and also just reality TV stars. That's kind of when it first started.
Because I feel like, well, I don't know, again, I wasn't there, but I feel like the first like really big reality show was Survivor. And that kind of kickstarted a lot of these other shows. But anyway, I just thought that was weird and it was interesting to see. It's not something that I miss, although it is quite dramatic.
It's intense. It's an intense first season.
So we open in Paris to what I thought was Whiplash Central with 3,000 different camera angles of 12,000 things within the span of a few seconds. This was a very whiplashy, dramatic opening. So Pat and Brenda are the first team to depart at 9:06 p.m. And they have to find Le Grand Roue, which supposedly translates to the big wheel.
And I love, because not only them, but every team got kind of stumped with what are the hours of the Ferris wheel? 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. Now, I struggle with the a.m. or p.m. Do you want to know the only way I'm able to remember it? There's the One Direction album Made in the a.m. And sometimes if I note that, there's a song called A.M. on the album. So if I'm ever thinking 12 a.m. or p.m., what is midnight? I remember the One Direction album. Little hack for people if you're really struggling. A.m. made in the a.m. It was done at night.
Who knew One Direction was so educational? What would you do without them, really?
I wouldn't know noon from my midnight.
I think pretty much every team thought, oh, we're going to have to wait till the morning. They thought it was only open for like 3 hours. But there are 4 teams that get there before 12:30 a.m. Pat and Brenda, Team Guido, Robin Brennan, Frank and Margarita. They make it just barely because Frank and Margarita only started the leg at 12:18 a.m. So they only had 12 minutes to get there. But it was just down the street.
Yeah, I think that Margarita, I guess, obviously speaks French. So she was able to quite quickly speak with someone and get their location. I feel like having that time constraint and having people start so close to the end of that time constraint, I don't know if that's something we would see so much of nowadays, because obviously, you know, the show is planned down to a T before anything is shot, anybody goes anywhere. This is maybe, we'll do some research on this later, but I was even reading that the contestants get tons of visas and visas for countries they may not ever need.
Yes. Yeah, I think I saw the same thing as you because I was reading something, I don't remember where, but they were talking about teams just had to get like 40 visas just to throw them off of where they were going. But
yeah. Anyway, what was my point there? My point there was that the show it's one of those other things where you can see that it's still in its infancy of planning, because nowadays the weight I feel would be more intentional to divide the teams. Here it just seemed really quite unfair, and there was distinct advantages between teams.
Although they were kind of equalized in the end because the museums and the detour both opened at 10 a.m.
That was another thing. There were two, again, very different tasks, but I don't like that one of them kind of intentionally was there to trick you. One was very
Yeah.
straightforward, go up these stairs, which is strenuous, but it's straightforward and you find the clue. The other one was just kind of weird. I don't know. Do you feel like that happens a lot now? The kind of
No.
tricking
But I
of
mean, I think
yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit later, the detour more, but yeah, they have to find the big wheel. But if Margarita speaks French, isn't Le Grand Rue just a translation to the big wheel?
Probably, but I'd assume that it's if I went somewhere where I spoke the language, but I might not necessarily know what the big landmarks are, because that's not a historical landmark that we would know of
I
in the
guess so.
country.
Yeah,
So it could be anything. It could be a wheel of cheese.
I guess so. So yes, Kevin and Drew start at 12:27 a.m. and they realize there's no way they're going to make it because they can't get there in 3 minutes. So they end up taking the fast forward.
Which again seemed incredibly easy, other than the wait out, and they slept out on the streets to
Yeah,
wait for it. You go in and you ask for tea. It seemed quite simple.
yeah, it's quite simple. And the thing with the fast forward is it's a risk because you could fall behind if another team gets the fast forward before you do because you spend all this time like trying to get to the fast forward and do the task. But if someone else were to go for the fast forward, they would just see, oh, Kevin and Drew are sleeping outside this building. So they don't lose anything from taking the risk of doing the fast forward.
No, everybody except for the four teams you mentioned, even they had to wait. It was kind of a long couple
Yeah,
hours of waiting overnight, really, till 9, 10 a.m. before anybody could continue the race. Just and we mentioned that because the two attractions they needed to get to for their detour tasks didn't open till 9 or 10 a.m. and most of them didn't get their clue until 9 or 10 a.m. and they
yeah.
had started very late.
So a couple other things that I had noted was during this opening thing when Nancy and Emily start, we get this emotional speech from Emily about how before this she only knew her mom as a mom but not really as a person. And then while this voiceover is happening, it's a scene of them nearly getting hit by a car. They're like going to look out and there's cars coming and just nearly avoid getting rammed by this car.
I remember the voiceover, but I didn't remember that it was edited over that.
Yeah, it was very strange. And then also another thing was that we learned that Dave and Margaret actually had a penalty from the last leg because of a
Yes,
technicality.
I was quite shocked they didn't mention that in the last episode because
Yeah.
typically you would mention it as the team is checking in.
Yeah, maybe they didn't even know exactly what to do in that situation, so they only like assigned the penalty after the fact. I don't know.
I don't think so. My best guess would be that because this is network television and there's restricted time per episode, they looked at that footage and didn't want to waste a couple minutes with it when there was more substantial things they could have put into the episode. So they decided to
Yeah,
push it to this episode and just cut this one down a bit. That would be my best guess.
I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense because there was a lot going on last episode
Yeah.
with the Lenny and Karen stuff and Kim and Leslie. But just to go over what happened here, Dave and Margareta harnessed their inner Kim and Leslie and ran straight past the remark where the Eiffel Tower and just went directly up. And they figured out what to do from Paul, but they never actually completed the task. They just figured out what to do and left without doing the roadblock. But they never told us how long the penalty was.
It's typically an hour or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But yes, yeah, the first ever penalty in Amazing Race history.
Goes to your team.
It does go to my team, yes. So yeah, they ended up in 8, actually. But I know in recent Canadian seasons, they've given out extremely long, like 2-3 hour long penalties that are just completely detrimental to teams.
Can you give an example of what would the situation be?
Just give up. Or they don't want to do a task, or it's too hard or
Right,
whatever.
I've
And
seen
then,
that before.
yeah, but I guess the penalty is given based on how severe the thing is, because I guess this is just a small technicality versus giving up on the task entirely. I don't know exactly how
I think
they're dished out.
typically with when a team just decides we're not going to do this task and they just move on and take the penalty, typically isn't the penalty kind of equated to how long it would have taken them to complete the task or how long the average team took to complete the task?
I think that was like the initial idea, but I think they ended up. I don't know if this is true, but to my knowledge, I think they ended up extending it because if you just take the time that it would have taken to do the task, then people can strategically take penalties to get ahead if other people are struggling with the task more. So I think they add time to make it longer to make people not want to quit tasks, because
That
I
would
don't know
make
if that's
sense.
great television if people aren't doing the tasks. This didn't seem to be too harsh of a penalty. And then also at the top of the episode, Amy talks about this, but I can't imagine how disorienting it must be to be a part of this race time-wise with the different time zones starting at 3 a.m. being on planes for a large amount of time.
Which you never consider. Obviously, you consider how exhausting the physical race would be, but just you have no concept of where you are. And I mean, like, in the span of a couple
Yeah,
of days, really, this is maybe what, 4 or 5 days, 6 or 7 days into the
maybe.
race at this
Yeah,
point. You've been on 3 different continents. You've been in at least 3 or 4 different time zones. Your sleep is probably minimal because you're so jet lagged. And I mean, you might be sleeping okay because of how exhausted you are from the race. But yeah, you really have no concept of the outside world,
no, and yeah, no sense of time either.
which is quite ironic considering whole race is built around being out in the world and exploring it. I mean, obviously, you're not
Yeah.
losing that, but you're just kind of in your own bubble of time and perception.
Yeah. And I feel like if I was on the race, a lot of the time, we talked about this last episode too, but I feel like it would be hard to appreciate where you are because you're just in the mindset of like, go, we need to leave and complete the task and get out of here as fast as possible.
And again, this is something I think the race got better at, either through editing or through the way they designed the tasks or the roads to get to the tasks. They just got better at allowing the contestants. But you can see in this first season, it's all go, go, go. There's no kind of moment to just sit. Because I feel like I have a couple small snippets of, in the Canadian version or whatever, your way of transportation is a boat and you get to just sit for, even if it's 15 minutes down the river while you wait to get off. And once you're off, you're running. But it's just kind of nice 15 minutes to just relax.
Exactly. So teams get to Le Grand Rue and people end up sleeping outside of the wheel on the streets of Paris. So Paul and Amy, Lynn and Karen and David and Margareta all sleep outside the Ferris wheel in their sleeping bag in the rain. So I have a couple questions. Do they carry their sleeping bags with them at all times? Because I can imagine that taking up a lot of space in their backpacks.
I was gonna look into something for this week. I forgot, but I was gonna look into the official rules for what teams are allowed to carry in their backpacks. I didn't get around to it, but that's something I will definitely do for next week. But yeah, I mean, you can see with some of the sleeping bags, they look like they're the lightweight ones, the kind of
Yeah.
foily texture. It's not foil, but the lightweight, rain-resistant, heat insulating ones. But I can't imagine it being very. I wonder how much does backpacks weigh?
Yeah, I don't know. And then also, when we cut to the next day, Amy is telling Nancy about like that they've been out in the rain since 2
Oh
a.m.
yeah.
And then Nancy just goes, well, why didn't y'all go to the hotel? I was like, and then Amy's expression immediately drops and she goes, what hotel?
Oh, I
And then we
love
immediately
that.
move on from this. It was so good, but there was no explanation. Like, did they get hotel rooms for the contestants, but they didn't tell everybody? Like, how did Nancy and
I
Emily
feel
know,
like
but the others didn't?
I feel like hotel rooms again might have to come out of the money that they were given for the episode. That would be my guess. But yeah, it wasn't very clear there. But it didn't make a lot of sense either because, if you're all obviously you're lined up there, you get the clues in a certain order, but you're all there anyway, so you kind of are all on the same playing field, same level.
I was quite confused about that, but it was a good comedic little moment where he goes, what hotel? Or she goes, oh, but just to talk about the fast forward again, Kevin and Drew set up camp right outside of this tea shop, and I can't imagine them having their contestants sleep on the streets of Paris nowadays. I can't imagine how dangerous that would be and how much of a liability that could be.
Yeah, it's you I mean, that's the other thing too. There's this rule of I would just keep thinking about the camera crew and the sound or the camera guy and the sound recordist. Where are they? Are they also sleeping out in
Yeah,
the streets of Paris? It makes no sense. I will say Kevin and Drew sleeping for the fast forward there made a little more sense because, they've staked their claim as the people getting the fast
okay.
forward, so anybody else who comes just won't bother. But again, the fast forwards would be done very differently nowadays.
Well, yeah, I feel like with the camera people and the sound people, I feel like they would have to stay there because what if something interesting happens and then they miss it, you know?
I will say, while all of this is happening, we got people sleeping by the Le Grand Rue, you've got people sleeping by the tea shop. I love that Team Guido is just in a cafe
Yeah,
having espressos or whatever. I thought that was so nice. And honestly, that is what I would probably do. I'd be thinking, well, we're in Paris. We've got
I
hours.
love that.
We're
Yeah.
not gonna get great sleep. Let's go out. Let's go see the city. Let's have fun.
Yeah, they talk about going to their old house. It's a good like little contrast of them enjoying their tea while everybody else is miserable in the rain.
It really is, but I take that as a lesson if I'm ever on The Amazing Race. Look for those little moments. I feel like now though
Yeah,
it's so curated to just you don't have 12 hours of free time like that. But
Yeah, don't think people would have the freedom to go have a cup of tea in the middle of the race, but who knows?
but good for them.
Until we get on the show, we don't know.
We'll never know. So it's 9 a.m. They get their clues. Some of them are already at the locations they need to be. Some of them are just getting the
Yes.
clue to send them one of two ways to the detour. And so, what are our two detour options?
So our two detour options are easy walk or tough climb. And I will say there seems to be a theme with the detour so far. In every like where there's an option that's easier but has more of a risk, and then there's an option that's seemingly harder but with a lower risk. So in episode 1, we had the episode 1 where you had the zip line and the scary thing versus the walk, and then episode 2 was the you could go farther but you're guaranteed to do this, or you could go closer but it's more of a risk. And then here it's kind of the same thing where you can go somewhere that seems to be more difficult, which is a tough climb, which doesn't seem to be that difficult. You just climb a set of stairs. Or you can have an easy walk and go to, what's it called? Focal pendulum next to a cat. But the catch is there are 2 focal pendulums, but only one is next to a cat.
And the one next to the cat is in the Pantheon, correct? Whereas the other
Yes.
pendulum that's not next to a cat is in, which is an Arts and Science Museum?
Arts and Crafts. Museum of
Yes.
Arts and Crafts, yes. I thought this was really stupid. It was just completely unlucky that Pat and Brenda went to the wrong museum. That was not their fault at all. How were they supposed to know?
Wasn't well planned. I like that the quote-unquote easy option was better than in episode 2 where everybody just kind of picked the easy option and it was really easy. Whereas here, that so-called easy option had that kind of trick element to it, but I didn't like how sneaky the trick element was.
No, because they didn't know about it. They just were told to go to this pendulum, and they didn't realize there were 2. And they just pulled the fast one on Pat and Brenda and said, "Gotcha."
Who had been waiting there for hours.
Yes, and they get there, and then they find the pendulum, and they're so confused about where's the cat. And I think they ask an employee about like, is there a cat right here? They're like, I've never seen a cat here. And it's not like the other teams who went to the Pantheon did anything better than Pat and Brenda. They just happened to talk to the right people to guide them to the Pantheon. Whereas the people that Pat and Brenda talked to, I guess, guided them to the Arts and Crafts Museum. Justice for Pat and Brenda. They didn't do anything wrong.
Dumb luck.
I feel like the luck does play a large role in Amazing Race, where a lot of teams get unlucky and they have a bad cab driver, or it's a lot of things that are out of the hands of the production team. But this was completely in the hands of the production team. It did not make any sense. I did not like that at all.
But then in true TV fashion, they never explain how Pat and Brenda ended up getting to the Pantheon. It's just kind of, oh, they're here now, and they get the clue eventually.
And we don't really see much of Pat and Brenda for the rest of the episode. It's just that we just kind of assume they're wandering around, and then eventually we see them at the pit stop.
But we'll get to that later.
Okay, and then we have conflict at the Pantheon between Brennan and Rob and Frank and Margarita, who seem to be still like in an alliance, and then with Team Guido.
Yeah, like Robin Brennan and Dave and Margarita seem to still kind of have a good dynamic between the two of them, but the former third team of the alliance, they're not so friendly with. What exactly? They're all let in a specific order.
Yeah, so they agreed to go in the building in the order that they arrived. So Robin and Brennan were first, then Frank and Margarita were second, and then Team Guido were in third. So the idea was that they were going to go to the clue in the order that they arrived. So Robin and Brennan were going to go first, and then the rest were going to proceed. But when they went in the building, Robin, Brennan, and Frank and Margarita went the wrong way, and Team Guido just kind of went the correct way and then ended up cutting them in line, which I don't think was anything wrong, but
it's a difficult situation because I've never been on The Amazing Race. I imagine I kind of would be ticked off if, I thought I was getting the clue first and I didn't. But at the same time, yeah, I guess it is based on your own directional skills. But was the pendulum within sight when they went? Did they just walk around it the wrong way, or were they fully trying to look for it in a different location in the building?
I think it might have been in its own separate room or something. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I thought that the whole we'll go in the order we got here thing was kind of stupid to begin with, because once again, this is a lawless game. And I'm a firm believer, not to go all don't hate the player, hate the game on you. But I think whoever gets there first gets there first. You can't try and control.
You do very much always say that don't hate the player, hate the game.
Whether it be Monopoly or this.
Monopoly, Wii Sports.
So yes, and then as Team Guido is leaving, they're walking past Frank and Marguerite and David and Brennan, and they try and confront them. They're like, what happened to going in order? And then Team Guido just simply ignores and keeps walking. And I think I would do the same. I'm not good with confrontation. I would just keep going.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in because I would feel too guilty. I would feel way too guilty. I would honestly probably be apologizing. I would just be saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry.
Well, I gotta do what I gotta do. But I feel like Team Guido is definitely being set up as the villains of the season in this episode, where they go back on their word like quite a few times. And also with them being so confident about being in Paris, because we learn or we hear that they lived in Paris for 2 years about a million times. And then to them,
they have the language.
Getting too confident.
Margarita has the language skills as well, but I guess she obviously didn't live there. So and you are put at a bit of an advantage, but I think also you feel a bit, not cocky, a bit
Well, I think they did come off as a bit cocky in this episode.
That's true. But I mean, yeah, you feel like you're at home. You feel like you kind of have the upper hand compared to everybody else.
And then, nothing really happened on the other side of the detour. They just walked up Notre Dame and rang the bell.
How many steps is that, though? Because, I mean, they're not going to give you such a difficult task if it's that easy.
Well, I mean, just looking at the building of Notre Dame, it doesn't seem to be a very tall building. No,
it's not a skyscraper. But the total climb this is just from a travel site, is 387 steps, but there aren't many places to rest. 387 steps.
Okay, I can't really conceptualize what that is. I feel like that's a decent amount.
That's a decent amount, yeah.
Nothing too, like, you're going to pass out because of it. I mean, people seem to be out of breath by the time they were at the top, but I don't think it was a struggle.
I think it's a mix of adrenaline, nerves, and, a little bit of just kind of the being worn out from running up the steps. I think being exhausted at the top is a combination of all three of those factors.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from the detour, they're told to find a man in a blue suit. And then this is where we have our roadblock, where people have to suit up and navigate the underground sewage system of Paris. And they have to travel 2 blocks underground in sewage.
When they were showing this, honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with the rats. I wouldn't have a problem with the sewage or the garbage. But the thought of being in the sewers absolutely terrifies me. I was watching the series Supernatural this summer, and there's this creature, it's a shapeshifter, that just the first time you see it, it just dwells in the sewers, but because it's a shapeshifter, every time it takes on the form of somebody else, it sheds off the previous form it has. So you see this creature for the first time, and there's just piles of almost like dead snake skin, but it's human skin everywhere, and it's just living in the sewers. My imagination would take over, and I'm done. I'm gone. Like, I'm sorry, Andrew. If it was you and me, I'd make you do it. I'm not touched. I'm not going down there. Well, if anything,
use that to motivate you to get out of there as fast as possible.
I don't think I would get out. I think I would just. We would be taking the penalty breakdown. There. We would be taking the penalty.
You've really been bringing in the references here on this podcast.
Pop culture icon, I guess.
I mean, I thought this detour, it was very cool, actually. I thought it was cool to, like, see the underground sewage system and them going through it. And I don't know how many times we can give props to the camera people, but they were walking backwards with cameras in these tight spaces with things that it seemed very easy to trip over, and it seems quite dangerous.
No, yeah, like all of the kind of fear and nerves aside from that task, taking myself out of it, it's a very impressive task, and it's actually quite a good one. Yep. And just the effort that the sound recordist and the camera person must have had to do, which something else I was wondering about, because is there one sound recordist per team, or sorry, one cameraman per team, or 2? Because you've got shots of one of the team members through the sewers and shots of the other one walking above ground. So that was something I was a little stumped on.
I feel like they have general camera people like at each position at each task. Yeah, I feel like that would make the most sense.
That's probably it.
So yes, overall, I thought this was cool.
No, it was cool. It was definitely really interesting.
I think this is probably my favorite task we've had so far. I thought it was quite interesting to watch.
Wow.
Them navigate through. But I mean, our tasks so far have not been anything revolutionarily entertaining. Although I think the
No,
Batoka George one was kind of cool.
Batoka George.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite task from any season of The Amazing Race you can recount?
Oh my God. I'd have to really rack my brain. Do you have one? Well, I think.
I do. I do have
Okay.
one, and it's one I think about a lot. It was, I want to say it was the regular Amazing Race, the American version. They were in Poland, and the challenge was in this big apartment building, and they had to run around to different apartments and get certain types of, I forget what the Danish is called, forgive me for that, but with different cream flavorings on the inside. And I don't know, I just thought that was the best task ever. You're running around an apartment getting different types of Polish pastries. I loved that. I
Wow,
think
that's
about
so
that a
Jill
lot.
of you. I really wish I had one, but I can't think.
I think about this one all the time. Every time I get a donut, a Danish,
You that comes up in your brain.
every time.
Well, okay. Anything else from the block?
No, the roadblock was pretty straightforward. Nobody really struggled with it, I don't think. The only note I will have is obviously a lot of teams kind of got there around the same time and were going through it at a pretty fast pace. But then we had the two teams behind, which were Dave and Margareta and Pat and Brenda, who Pat and Brenda obviously arrived quite late and they had obviously seen that all the boots
Yeah.
and the coveralls were all used up. But I love too, they just had such a positive attitude about it, even then,
Yeah.
which is why they were one of my favorite teams. They were just so positive about everything.
And I think that made it so much more heartbreaking when they got eliminated.
I know.
With everybody arriving there, I think somebody said that this is the first time really where a majority of the teams were in the same spot, and just with everybody rushing to who can get their suits on the fastest.
It had kind of leveled. I remember we made a comment about this last week, how we thought we were going to see a very clear divide in the teams in their ranks, which I think still was the outcome. But for a moment there, I thought, oh, this is all gone to pieces because everybody was at an equal level, and you thought this really could go any way. And I mean, ultimately, they completed that task. They were told to go to this guy in a blue suit standing in front of, was it a palace or something? Or a hotel. It was a hotel, I think. And he would give them a clue, and they were supposed to get on this train. And all the teams got on a train except for Dave and Margareta and Pat and Brenda. So then again, it still continued that everybody was on a level playing field. And the train was
Yes.
going to where?
It was going to the south of France. I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's Le Beau de Provence.
Something, yeah, I
And
think
then,
that's correct. But the train was going to
yeah,
Marseille, wasn't it? And then you take a taxi from Marseille was what most people were going to do.
yes, but there's also some drama at the train station where Team Guido is helping other teams, and they say, okay, we're going to help you guys, so you need to remember this. And I'm thinking, if somebody said that to me, that just puts a bad taste in my mouth. Can't you do something nice for me and like not make me feel like I have to owe you about it?
I feel like you in that circumstance would just be like, "No, we're good. We don't need help," and would just walk
Yeah,
away.
because I don't want to feel like I have to owe you later on. And then this all gets erased because they go and ditch the rest of the teams anyway, where everybody's headed to the wrong train, and then they turn around, and then one of them like calls out to the other people, and they're like, "No, don't tell them." So I feel like they just completely undid any good work that they did with the other teams, and made themselves look worse in the process if they didn't attempt to help them at all.
Yeah. No, that's again, it comes back to you have, yeah, I think at some point you just have to help other teams. You do, and you can't backstab them because that puts a target on your back. But you have to just keep this kind of level relationship with everyone where you're not going to go out of your way, but you're not going to try and actively get other people out. It's just that weird
Yeah,
balance.
yeah, and that just made the other teams more bitter. They were saying they were acting like how the Guidos were acting all nice to them, and then just went and essentially betrayed them.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody is on the same train, seemingly. And then Nancy goes in her little accent, well, I just think somebody didn't make the train.
Cut to.
Cue the extremely dramatic and suspenseful music as we cut to David, Margareta, and Pat and Brenda.
In that moment, I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, it's our two teams.
I know, I know.
Those our teams didn't make the train."
This is where they bring up a lot of tourists take the train to, how do you say it, Marseille, which takes longer.
Our side.
But locals get off the train at Avignon, which is closer to where they need to go.
Because the taxi from Avignon to the palace or the castle ruins the pit stop was at is actually closer than where the train ends, which is Marseille. The taxi from there to the castle.
Yeah. And they say, yeah, locals go to Marseille. And does anybody have any idea if anyone was a local? Did we hear if anybody has ever lived in Paris for any amount of time?
I think all of them, everybody who got off at that stop, which was Team Guido, Robin Brennan, and Dave and Margarita, correct? Just those three? I think they all got
Uh,
that information just from speaking to other people, correct?
so they made it seem like Team Guido already knew, but I don't know if they did. But they did say that Rob and Brennan were talking to someone who like was from the area, and then they told him, or he told them to get off there, and then Rob and Brennan told Frank and Margarita because they're still an alliance at this point.
I think they have a good kind of dynamic between the two of them. You know, they're doing their own thing and they're very much on their own, but they do kind of give each other those little bits of help. That's kind of the situation I would want to be in with other teams.
Yeah. And then also, Dave and Margareta, despite being on a later train, they also get off at Avignon as well and beat the other teams.
They pulled an impressive comeback.
They did. Yeah. It was genius hour.
Genius hour. Wow.
Yeah. That hour, they just full on geniuses. And then also, Frank and Margarita, when they were in the car, were talking about how they don't really want to work with Robin Brennan and how like they were just using them for their language skills or whatever. So I guess that seems like a little bit of a divide in the alliance, but I don't know. And like, isn't that the point of the alliance? So you can use each other's skills?
I guess so, yeah. And I mean, they were really good about kind of dividing up those tasks and helping each other out.
Yeah.
Throughout most of the leg without being too codependent. Just we have to stick together all the time,
Right.
which is nice. You know, go
Yeah.
at your own pace, but then lend a hand when you can.
So we get to the castle ruins. So this is Chateau de Vaux, which is the incorrect way of saying that, but that's the way I'm going to say it. And Kevin and Drew are in first because of the fast forward, obviously. And I don't know how I feel about having a fast forward in every leg because I feel like it takes away the fight for first place because whoever gets the fast forward is automatically going to be in first, and then everyone else is just aiming for second.
That's true. I mean, I think Kevin and Drew played the fast forward very well in this episode. They knew where they were at, they knew what the task was, and they took advantage of it. I don't know if I would have done the same play with a fast forward, but it definitely would have been something I would have considered if I hadn't used it already. But yeah, you can definitely see how the fast forward has changed and become such a rare thing in the episodes because it does kind
Yeah.
of just throw everything off.
And then we have Frank and Margarita in second. I think that's the best they've done so far. Robin Brennan in third and Tim Guido in fourth. They're keeping their spot in the upper echelon, I guess.
Yep.
And then Dave and Margareta in fifth with the comeback of the
Must
century.
be very happy about that.
Right in the middle of the pack, they are. And I think that's where they've kind of tended to be.
That's where you want to be, I think.
Yeah. And then we have the underdogs that they proclaimed themselves with Paul and Amy in sixth, Lenny and Karen in seventh, Nancy and Emily in eighth, and then Anda in ninth. Yes.
I loved there was a moment on the map because Paul and Amy, Lenny and Karen, and Nancy and Emily all checked in at the same time. And Nancy just said to all of them, "I'm so proud of you." Like just such a sweet or what was it? I'm so proud of you. Such a sweet, like true mom type line. I just thought that was so
Yeah.
nice. There's hugs and high fives. I just thought, oh, that's so nice.
I feel like there's something to be said about a bond that's made between teams who are at the bottom and constantly fighting. I feel like they all have a common goal of wanting to dethrone the top teams, you know?
And they're just
There's
trying to pull each
solidarity
other up.
there.
You know, you're not trying to put anybody down.
So I'm here for this little, it was very wholesome.
It was very wholesome. And then even the elimination, I wanna make a take here. I don't think Phil was actually there when Pat and Brenda were eliminated.
Oh wow, was it just voiceover?
No, because the only shot you see of Phil is about chest up against and he kind of steps into the frame, but you never see him with the two of them. And, you know, he says the line. But if you watch it back, and maybe this is just my film brain going, but it's exactly what you do when the character doesn't have anybody to talk to. You know, you just want to shoot the one character. So you just have them stand there and deliver the line, and there's actually nobody there. If you watch it back with that in mind, because you never see Pat and Phil in the same shot. You just see Phil kind of step up into one frame, and he goes, Pat and Brenda, I'm sorry to tell you, you have been eliminated from the race. And you really don't see him again. And then it just kind of focuses on Pat and Brenda talking to their camera team.
Wow, that is a great notice. I fully believe you, even though I can't remember that, but I feel like you're correct. But do you think this could be because Pat and Brenda were there so late? Because it seemed to be like very dark by the time they arrived.
I think there's a good chance that, yeah, maybe, I don't know why Phil would have left, or maybe it's just the take they had. They were good, or there was some reason
Yeah,
basically it didn't work out, but they just decided to, okay, we're just going to shoot this because we know Pat and Brenda are the team that is going to be eliminated.
interesting.
And I mean, I don't think they introduced these in this season yet, but because obviously when the Canadian version started, there's the non-elimination rounds, right? And I found out a way very early on to tell if it's an elimination round or a non-elimination round. Do you know how that
Yeah,
works? You know the little
it's
trick?
yeah. Instead of saying like if you got
At the beginning
eliminated
of the
right away, they
show,
like ask them a question, or you're just saying something else.
at the beginning of the show, there's always the little brief explanation of the rules, but then the voiceover of the host will usually goes, and the last team to arrive will be eliminated. But on the non-elimination rounds, it's the last team to arrive. It's either may or could be eliminated.
But I thought they always said that. Like every single time they say May, don't they?
I
They
thought there
got.
was a difference. Watch me put this fact out there and then be completely wrong, but it's something I always
I
listened
don't
for.
think. I think they always say May.
Well, you know what? I will look like a fool for this episode, and we will do some research and watch some more modern episodes because they didn't start this
Yeah.
now because I don't think they incorporated non-elimination rounds in the
Okay.
first couples.
Well, speaking of that, though, I was looking, and there are 13 episodes in this season, but there are only 11 teams, so I think there has to be an elimination.
13 episodes, 11 teams, unless the finale is split into a couple episodes, like two or something.
But even then, because in your finale episode, there's 3 teams, right?
Yeah, interesting. Well,
So I think we may see a non-elimination coming up.
oh, well, then maybe we can test what I thought was a fact or might just be a theory.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the race. That was this leg. And where are we headed next week?
Seemingly grown because they mentioned a Coliseum.
Oh, yes. There was some fire too.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the only notes I have for next episode is that there's another Paul and Amy meltdown, and then I also just have Rome ? That's it for that.
All right. Well, we will find out.
Yeah, but I just want to say again, I feel so bad for Pat and Brenda because they didn't get eliminated because of their stupidity. It wasn't their fault. It was just an unlucky mistake.
Honestly, yeah, if the clue had been more clear, they probably would have still been in first or second.
Yeah, they were a fun team because they were out in front. They started this leg in first place, in first to last, just like that. So yeah, did you have any concluding thoughts on this episode or anything moving forward?
Not really. It was a lot of waiting, which was different than kind of the first couple episodes, which I feel like was a lot of travel, following people getting places. This episode was a lot of, I mean, a significant portion of it was just watching them sleep till it was 9 a.m.
Yeah.
It was definitely a different pace than previous episodes.
Yeah, and we didn't get an airport scene.
No,
My
no
beloved
airplanes.
airport scenes. Yeah, because we stayed in France, in Paris for the majority of the time.
Yep.
But I'm excited to see where they go in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to email us. The email is in the description box. AmazingRaceRewind@gmail.com. Let us know.
Also, we have launched our Instagram page, so go follow us on Instagram at Amazing Race Rewind. I will be posting clips and updates for when our episodes are out. So go over there. We're having fun. I'm having fun at least doing my little clips and uploading them. So yeah.
I can tell you've enjoyed that.
Follow us, email us, do what you gotta do. Follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify. Give us a good review. It'll help us. And that is it for us. We will see you next week with season 1, episode 4. Okay?
See you next week.
Bye.